She did not see it coming. That was the thing nobody would understand later, when the stories started circulating and people began constructing their own versions of what happened that night. Nobody would ask whether she had seen it coming. They would just assume she had walked into it. That a woman like her at an event like that should have known better than to be there at all. But she hadn't seen it coming. She had just been standing there. The Latte Hotel Grand Ballroom was the kind of room that made you feel the distance between yourself and everyone else the moment you walked in. High ceilings, chandeliers that cost more than most people's apartments, women in gowns that moved like water, and men in suits that had been made for their bodies and no one else's. Zuri had been to events like this before, not many, but enough to know how to hold herself in one. Chin up, expression neutral. Move like you belong even when every signal in the room is telling you that you don't. She was there for work. Her firm had secured a table at the annual KBC Innovation Gala, one of those evenings where Seoul's corporate world dressed itself up and pretended it was also cultured. Her manager had handed her the ticket that morning like it was a reward. She had smiled and said thank you and gone home to find something appropriate to wear. She had worn the burgundy dress, the one that was elegant without being loud. She had done her makeup carefully. She had arrived on time. None of it mattered. The woman's name was Shin Hiren. Zuri would learn that later. At the time, she was just a voice, sharp and carrying, the kind of voice designed to cut across a room and land on everyone in it at once. She was standing with a group near the champagne display, and Zuri had simply walked too close while looking for someone from her firm. Oh. Hiren's eyes moved over her slowly. Not quickly. Slowly. The kind of look that was meant to be seen by the people around her. Did the hotel hire new serving staff? These events really have gone downhill. Laughter. Not loud. Just enough. The soft, contained kind that is worse than the loud kind because it means people agree but don't want to be caught agreeing. Zuri went very still. She was not holding a tray. She was not in uniform. She was wearing a dress that had cost her 2 weeks of careful saving and heels that she had broken in over 3 evenings of walking around her apartment. There was nothing in her appearance that suggested she was staff. Nothing except that she was black, and that she was alone, and that she had walked into the orbit of a woman who had decided, in that moment, to make an example of something. Zuri opened her mouth. She did not know what she was going to say. Something calm. Something that would close the moment without escalating it. She had done this before. This particular kind of management, the quiet, dignified exit from a situation that was designed to make you small. She was good at it. She had had to become good at it. But before the words came, Hiren tilted her head and said it again. Louder this time. Performing it now. I'm serious. Can someone tell management that the dress code for staff has become very creative? More laughter. Someone nearby turned to look. Then someone else. And Zuri felt the familiar tightening, not in her chest, not in her throat, but somewhere deeper than both. That specific place where dignity lives and where the cost of defending it is always higher than it should be. She stood in it. She did not look down, but she did not move either. That was the moment he walked in. She didn't see him enter. Nobody announced him. But something changed in the room, a shift so small and so complete that she felt it before she understood it. The laughter near her faded first, then the conversation around it. Then Hiren's expression. Hiren's expression changed completely. Zuri turned. He was moving through the room the way water moves around stone, not aggressively, not with any visible effort, just finding the path that everything else automatically cleared. He was tall, dark suit, no tie. His face was still, the way faces are still when they have learned that stillness is its own kind of language. He was not looking at Hiren. He was looking at Zuri, and she felt the ground do something strange beneath her feet. Because she knew that face. Not from this room. Not from any event or board meeting or newspaper headline. From a corridor. From a Tuesday afternoon 14 years ago, when she had been 16 years old and new to Seoul and furious at something she could not walk past. He stopped in front of her. He did not look at Hiren, did not acknowledge the group, did not perform anything. He looked at Zuri the way you look at something you stopped believing was real. You're here. His voice was low. Not a question exactly. More like something said out loud to confirm it was true. Zuri could not speak for a moment. Not because she was frightened. Because something in her chest had just done something she had not given it permission to do. Dong Li. It came out before she thought about it. Just his name. Barely above a breath. Something moved across his face. Fast. Gone before she could name it. He turned then, only slightly, just enough, and looked at Hiren for the first time. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Hiren's entire posture had already changed. The performance was over. The group around her had gone quiet in that specific way that meant they understood exactly who had just entered and what his presence in this direction meant for all of them. Hiren said something low and apologetic. Zuri barely heard it. Dong Li looked back at Zuri. He gestured, not a command, just a direction, toward the more quiet end of the room. Walk with me. She should have said no. That was what she would tell herself later, in the days when everything started unraveling, and she was trying to find the moment she could have chosen differently. She should have said no. She should have thanked him and walked the other way, and gone back to her table, and finished the evening and gone home and filed the whole thing under strange coincidences and left it there. But she had looked at his face again, and something old and stubborn had moved in her chest. Something that had been sitting quietly for 14 years without her permission. So she walked with him. They found a space near the window at the far end of the ballroom. The city spread out below them, Seoul at night, all light and motion and scale. Neither of them spoke immediately. He stood close enough that she was aware of it. Not inappropriately close. Just present. The way he had always been present, even at 16, even in a school corridor, like the air around him had a slightly different weight. How long have you been in Seoul? 3 years. She kept her voice steady. You. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted, almost amused, but not quite. I live here, Zuri. She had forgotten. Or maybe she hadn't forgotten. Maybe she had just never let herself think about it too directly. That he would be here. That Seoul was his city in a way it would never fully be hers. I know, she said. I meant, I didn't know if you were still. She stopped. Never mind. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I looked for you. She turned to look at him. After school. When I came back from the military. I looked for you. His eyes were on the city, not on her. You were not easy to find. I wasn't trying to be found. I know. A pause. I almost stopped. 3 weeks ago, actually. I decided to stop. She didn't know what to do with that. So she said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. He finally looked at her. Fully. The way he had looked at her in the middle of the room, like he was still confirming she was real. And then you were just here. This was the kind of story that didn't announce itself. It didn't arrive with warnings or obvious signs. It arrived like Dong Li had arrived in that ballroom, quietly, completely, and with a kind of weight that meant once you felt it, you could not unfeel it. What happened between Baek Dong Li and Zuri McDonald was not a love story in the clean sense. It was something older and more complicated. It was two people who had already changed each other, years before either of them understood how, finding each other in a city that had no interest in making space for what they were about to become. He was one of the most powerful men in Korea. She was a woman building something careful and deliberate in a country that hadn't been built with her in mind. And the moment his attention landed on her, really landed, publicly, unmistakably, everything she had spent 3 years constructing started to shake. Not because he wanted to hurt her. Never that. Because loving her, for Baek Dong Li, was not a quiet thing. And quiet was the only thing that had been keeping her safe. Stay with me on this one. Get comfortable. Because this story does not let go easily. And I need you to be ready for what these two people are about to cost each other. If you've ever loved someone whose world was too big for the life you were trying to protect, drop your city below. You already know how this feels. And if you've never experienced it, you're about to. The next morning, Zuri's phone started. Not from Dongli. From her colleague Peta, who sat 3 desks away and had apparently been at the same gala the previous evening at a different table and had seen the whole thing from across the room. Girl, was that Baek Dongli standing with you by the window for 40 minutes last night? Zuri stared at the message, then typed back, we went to school together. It was nothing. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Zuri, that is not a nothing man. That man does not do nothing. She put her phone down and went to make coffee. By the time she got back, there were 4 more messages. 2 from Peta, 1 from a number she didn't recognize, and 1 from her manager, Kwon Jae-won, which simply read, "Can you come in early today? Need to talk." She stood in her kitchen, holding her coffee with both hands, and looked out at the Seoul morning. Gray sky. The city already moving. Already indifferent. She had a feeling standing there that something had already started. That it had started the moment she had said his name in that ballroom, and he had looked at her like that. That the careful, deliberate life she had been building, the one that asked nothing of anyone and drew no attention and gave her just enough room to breathe, had already begun to change shape. She just didn't know yet how much. Kwon Jae-won was a man who expressed discomfort through efficiency. He didn't waste words when he was relaxed, and he didn't waste words when he was anxious. The difference was in the speed. That morning, he was speaking very fast. "I just want to make sure I understand the situation correctly," he said, not quite looking at her. "You and Baek Dongli have a prior relationship. We went to the same school for 1 year. When we were teenagers. And last night, we hadn't seen each other since then. It was a coincidence." Jae-won nodded. Kept nodding slightly longer than the nod required. "Right? Of course." He rearranged something on his desk. "It's just that there are some photos circulating this morning. From the gala. And people are drawing conclusions." Zuri felt something settle into place in her chest. Cold and familiar. "What kind of conclusions?" He finally looked at her. "The kind that make our clients nervous. We have 3 meetings this week with firms that have existing relationships with the Beck Group. And if there's a perception that our work is being influenced by a personal connection, there is no personal connection. I understand that. I believe you." He said it quickly. Too quickly. "But perception is not my responsibility to manage." The room went quiet. Jae-won looked at her with an expression that was almost apologetic and almost something else. "Zuri, I'm trying to help you here. I'm telling you this before it becomes a formal conversation. Just be careful. Keep your distance. Make sure there's nothing that can be misread." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag. "Thank you for letting me know." She did keep her distance. For 2 weeks, she kept it perfectly. She did not contact him. She did not respond to the one message he had sent the morning after the gala. Short, no pressure, just his number and the words "when you're ready." She left it on read and told herself that was the right thing. And it was the right thing. She knew it was. But knowing something is right and feeling it is right are 2 separate experiences. And in those 2 weeks, something kept happening to her that she couldn't quite explain. She would be in the middle of a meeting, and her mind would slide, just for a second, back to the window, to the city spread out below, and his voice saying, "I almost stopped. 3 weeks ago, I decided to stop." She would pull her attention back, refocus, finish the meeting, and then it would happen again. She was not a woman who lost focus. She had built her entire life in Seoul on focus, on precision and discipline, and the understanding that she did not have the margin for error that some of her colleagues had. One wrong move cost her twice what cost anyone else in that office. She knew this. She had always known this. So she kept her distance. And she was fine. She was completely fine. Until the Thursday evening when she was leaving the office late and she stepped out of the building, and he was there. Not waiting in a dramatic way. Not positioned at the entrance. He was standing slightly to the side, looking at his phone, in a coat that cost more than her monthly rent, like someone who happened to be in the area, like someone who had not timed this down to the minute. He looked up when she pushed through the door. I was in the neighborhood. She stopped walking, looked at him, looked at the building behind her, looked back at him. This is Mapo-gu. I know where it is. There is nothing in Mapo-gu that requires Baekdong-lee. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Have dinner with me? No. Why not? Because she stopped. Because the answer was complicated, and she didn't want to give him the complicated answer standing on a pavement in Mapo-gu. Because it's not a good idea. I've had bad ideas before. This doesn't feel like one. Your feelings and the consequences are not the same thing. He looked at her steadily. What consequences? And she almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the question was so genuinely, completely earnest. Like a man who had lived inside so much power for so long that the architecture of consequence had simply stopped being visible to him. Dong Lee. She said his name carefully. Like a boundary. Do you know what happened at my office the morning after the gala? He was quiet. My manager called me in. There are photos. People are already. She stopped. Chose the next words deliberately. Your attention is not neutral. It lands on people. And it lands hard. And I have built something here that I cannot afford to have. I'll fix it. That's not, she exhaled. That's not the point. You can't fix perception by applying more of the thing that's causing the problem. He looked at her for a long moment. The street moved around them. People passing, a bus, the ordinary noise of a city that did not care about either of them. Have dinner with me, he said again. More quiet. Not as Baekdong-lee. Just as the person who owes you a debt they've been carrying for 14 years. She looked at him. Something about the way he said it, carrying, made her chest do that thing again. That thing she had specifically asked it not to do. One dinner, she said, against her better judgment. Against everything she had spent 2 weeks carefully constructing. And then we go back to our separate lives. He didn't say anything. Just gestured toward the street. She walked beside him, and she told herself firmly that this was closure. That was all. This was just the closing of something old. She almost believed it. The restaurant he chose was not what she expected. She had anticipated somewhere obvious, somewhere that announced itself, that required reservations months in advance, that would put them in a room full of people who would recognize him and photograph them and feed the exact problem she was trying to contain. She had been preparing herself for that. Instead, he took her to a small place in Songdong-gu, the kind that had handwritten menus and mismatched chairs and smelled like doenjang jjigae and something frying in the back. The kind of place that had been there for 30 years and would be there for 30 more and had absolutely no interest in who walked through its door. She looked around when they sat down. Nobody is going to see us here. He picked up the menu. That was the idea. She watched him study the menu, comfortable in the space, unhurried, and felt something shift in the picture she had been carrying of him. The version of Baekdong-lee that existed in her mind was the one from the ballroom. Still, powerful. A man the room rearranged itself around. And that version was real. She had seen it with her own eyes. But this version was also real. A man reading a handwritten menu in a mismatched chair. You come here often? She asked. Not for a long time. He set the menu down. I used to. Before things got a pause. Complicated. What complicated them? He looked at her. The company. My father died 6 years ago. I took over. He said it without any particular emotion, not flat, not performed. Just stated. The way people state facts they have had a long time to get used to. Everything changed after that. I'm sorry. About your father. Don't be. He picked up his water. He was not an easy man. She didn't push. He didn't offer more. And the silence between them was not uncomfortable. She noticed that. It should have been uncomfortable. Two people who barely knew each other in a quiet restaurant with 14 years between them. It should have felt like work. It didn't feel like work. Tell me about the 3 years, he said. Which 3 years? Here, Seoul. What brought you back? She considered how much to give him, then decided one dinner clean and complete, and then it's done. She could give him the honest version. My firm offered me a posting. International Development Consulting. I've been in London for 4 years after university, and She turned her glass slowly, ready for something different. Seoul made sense. I'd lived here before. I knew the city well enough. Did you think about the fact that I was here? She looked at him directly. Yes. He didn't look away. And I decided it didn't matter. You were someone I knew for 1 year when I was a teenager. The city is 12 million people. The odds were, she almost said fine. I decided it didn't need to factor in. Something moved in his expression. Not hurt exactly. Something more quiet. Fair enough, he said. The food came. They talked carefully at first, and then less carefully, and then in the way that happens when two people discover that the version of the other person they remembered has grown into something more interesting than they anticipated. She told him about London, about the years of building something from nothing in a city that wasn't particularly interested in helping her build it, about what it cost and what it gave back, about her mother in Nairobi who called every Sunday and asked when she was coming home and meant it as love but carried it as pressure. He told her about the company, about the years after his father, about the weight of an inheritance that came with no instruction manual and a board full of men who had been waiting for him to fail since the day he turned 30 and sat down at the head of the table. They still think I'll fail, she asked. Some of them. He didn't say it with bitterness, just accuracy. They've gotten better at hiding it. And do you care? He looked at her for a moment. I used to. I don't anymore. What changed? A pause. He turned his glass once. I got tired of performing stability for people who had already decided what they believed. At some point He stopped. You just do the work, and let the results be the answer. She understood that, more than she expected to. It sat between them for a moment, that understanding, warm and slightly dangerous. She looked down at her food. One dinner. One dinner became two. Not immediately. There was a gap of 10 days between them, during which Zuri went to work and focused and kept her phone face down on her desk and told herself the first dinner had been closure, and she felt closed, and that was that. But on the 10th day, he sent her a message. No preamble. Just, there's a place in Buckshin that does the best sundubu jjigae in the city. I've been arguing about this with my assistant for a week. You should be the tiebreaker. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed back, that is a transparent excuse. His reply came in under a minute. I know. Does it work? She put the phone down, picked it up again. Saturday. Not before 7. And that was how it started. Not with a declaration. Not with a dramatic moment. With sundubu jjigae and a transparent excuse and a woman who knew better and went anyway. They were careful at first. Different neighborhoods each time. Quiet places. No photographs that either of them took. The kind of evenings that felt like they existed slightly outside of regular life, removed from his world and from hers, in some neutral space that belonged only to the hours they were inside it. But Seoul is not a city that keeps secrets easily. And Baek Dong-lee, regardless of what restaurant he chose or what neighborhood he drove through, was not a man who disappeared. The second set of photos appeared on a Thursday. This time not at a gala. This time on a street in Buckshin, grainy and taken from a distance, the two of them walking side by side. Not touching, just walking, but close enough and relaxed enough that the image said something neither of them had said out loud yet. The headline on the gossip site read, "Who is the foreign woman Baek Dong-lee can't stop meeting?" Zuri found it at 6 a.m. before her first coffee. She sat with it for a long time. By 9 a.m., her colleague Peta was at her desk. Not asking, just sitting there with her own coffee and a look that said she had seen it and was giving Zuri the space to speak first. It's not what it looks like, Zuri said. Peta said nothing. She stopped, because she genuinely did not know how to complete that sentence. It's complicated. Zuri. Peeta's voice was gentle. I like you. So I'm going to say this as your friend, not as someone who works 3 desks away. That man is not casual. Whatever you think is happening, he is not approaching this casually. And the people in this city who care about what he does with his time are also not casual. Zuri looked at her coffee. I know. Do you? A pause. I know, she said again. More quiet. The call from J1 came that afternoon. This time it wasn't early. This time it wasn't gentle. He had printed the article. He had it on his desk when she sat down. He didn't put it in front of her, just left it there, visible, like a document they were both pretending not to see. I need to know if this is going to become a continuing situation, he said. It's not, because I have to be honest with you. He leaned forward slightly. This firm has worked very hard to establish credibility in this market. We are a foreign consultancy operating in a space where trust is everything. And if one of our senior associates becomes tabloid adjacent to one of the most prominent figures in Korean business, I'm not tabloid adjacent. I had dinner with someone I knew from school. Twice. She held his gaze. Yes, twice. Zuri. He exhaled. Sat back. I want to protect you. I genuinely do. But I need you to understand there are people above me who are going to ask questions I won't be able to answer favorably if this continues. Your visa status is tied to this firm. Your contract renewal is in 4 months. He paused. Let that land. I'm telling you this as clearly as I can. She understood. He had not said stop seeing him. He had said everything around it. She went back to her desk, sat down, looked at her screen without seeing it. 4 months. Contract renewal. Visa. She had built 3 years on this. 3 years of precision and care and twice the effort for half the margin for error. And it was all sitting in a pile now, slightly unstable, because she had walked beside someone on a street in Bukchin. She picked up her phone, opened his contact, stared at it. Then she put the phone down without sending anything, because she needed to think. And she could not think clearly when she was looking at his name. She thought about it for 4 days, turned it over from every angle, laid out the facts the way she would lay out a professional problem, clear, unsentimentally, without attachment to the outcome she wanted. Facts. She was on a work visa. Her contract renewed in 4 months. Her manager had communicated clearly and indirectly that her association with Dong Li was creating institutional risk. The tabloid presence was not going away. It would get worse, not better, the more time they spent together. His world was not built for someone like her. The socialites, the old money, the families who had been weaving themselves together for generations, they had already started talking. She had seen 3 comments on the gossip article before she stopped reading. None of them had been kind. And on the other side, the way he had stepped into that space at the gala without hesitation, the restaurant in Songdong-gu and the mismatched chairs, the Sundabu Jigi argument, the way he listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually listening with his full attention the way very few people did, the fact that he had looked for her 4 years and then stopped, and then she had walked back in. She turned it over and over, and on the 4th day, she called him. I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. A pause. Okay. What's happening between us? I can't do it. Not now. Maybe not ever. My life here is built on very specific conditions, and your presence in it, even quietly, even carefully, is destabilizing things I cannot afford to lose. My visa is tied to my contract. My contract is in 4 months. I have worked too hard and too long to watch it come apart because she stopped. Found the next words carefully. Because I made a decision with my feelings instead of my head. Silence on his end. She had asked him to let her finish. He was letting her finish. I think you are, she stopped again. Started differently. I think what happened between us at school, and now I think it matters. I'm not pretending it doesn't. But matching and being possible are not the same thing. And right now in my life, this is not possible. A long pause. Then, your contract renewal. Which firm handles it? Dong Li. I'm not going to interfere with it. I just want to understand the situation. That's not, she exhaled sharply. That is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't solve everything. Some things aren't yours to fix. I know that. Do you? Another silence. Longer this time. I hear you, he said finally. His voice was not cold. Something more controlled than cold. Like someone who has had a lot of practice putting things somewhere they won't be visible. I won't push. She closed her eyes. Thank you. But Zuri, a pause. I'm not going to pretend I'm fine with it. She didn't respond to that. She just said goodbye and ended the call and sat very still for a long moment in her apartment with the Seoul night outside the window. She had done the right thing. She was certain of it. It did not feel like the right thing. She threw herself into work. Completely, deliberately, the way she had learned to use work as architecture, as something to organize herself around when everything else felt structureless. She took on 2 additional projects. She stayed late. She was first in and often last out, and Peta watched her from 3 desks away with an expression that she pretended not to notice. 3 weeks passed. The tabloid attention faded. Without new material, the gossip sites moved on to other things the way they always did. Her manager stopped watching her quite so carefully. The meetings with the Beck-adjacent firms went smoothly. Everything went back to normal. Normal. She was fine. She was absolutely fine. She was lying in bed at midnight on a Wednesday not sleeping, which was fine, because sometimes people didn't sleep, and she turned her phone over and looked at the ceiling and told herself this was just the adjustment period and it would pass. It would pass. The betrayal, when it came, did not come from inside her world. It came from inside his. His name was Lim Tae-jun. He was on the Beck Group's board, second generation, old money, the kind of man who had never needed to earn anything and had developed a deep resentment toward anyone who had. He had been one of the men waiting for Dong Li to fail since the day he sat at the head of the table. And when the tabloid photos appeared, Tae-jun had seen something he could use. Zuri found out about it the way she found out about most things that happened in Seoul's corporate circles, through Peta, who had a contact at a competing firm who had overheard something at a client lunch. Someone had contacted her firm. Not J1. Above J1. The message, delivered carefully and indirectly through channels that left no fingerprints, was simple. The firm's continued access to 2 significant Beck Group adjacent accounts would be reviewed if the associate in question remained in a visible position at the company. She was not fired. Nothing so direct. Just repositioned. Moved from the lead role on both current projects to a support function. J1 told her in the same 2 fast voices before, except this time he couldn't quite look at her at all. It's temporary, he said. Until things settle. She looked at him for a long time. Long enough that he started to look uncomfortable. Who made the call? She asked. I don't have that information. She stood up. Picked up her things. I'll need the weekend to consider my options. Zuri. But she was already at the door. She did not call Dong Li. She sat with it. 2 days. She sat with the anger and the humiliation and the specific, precise unfairness of it, that she had done everything right. She had pulled back. She had made the correct decision. She had protected her position with both hands. And it hadn't mattered. The damage had already been done by simply being associated with him, by being in a photograph, by existing in his orbit. She sat with it until it settled into something colder and clearer than anger. And then she called him. He picked up on the second ring. Someone from your board contacted my firm. She did not say hello. I've been removed from my lead projects. My position is being quietly restructured. This is happening because of the photos. Because of the association. A pause. I need you to understand what your world is doing to mine. Silence on his end. The kind that was not empty, She could feel him processing it. Tell me the name. I don't have a name. I have a chain of indirection and a result. I'll find a name. Dong Li. Her voice was steady, harder than she meant it to be. What I need from you is not for you to fix it. What I need from you is to understand why I told you this was a problem. Why I said weeks ago that your world was going to cost me things I couldn't afford to lose. A long pause. I understand. His voice was very controlled. I understood then, too. He stopped. A rare thing. Baek Dong Li stopping in the middle of a sentence. I did not think it would move this fast or this directly. It always moves this fast. For people like me in situations like this. She exhaled. It just usually comes from a different direction. Another silence. I'm going to handle this, he said. Quiet. Final. I told you. I'm not fixing it for you. His voice shifted, something in it that she hadn't heard before. Not hard, not cold. Just certain. I'm fixing it because someone in my organization used their position to harm someone. That's not about you. That's about my house. She held the phone for a moment. Don't make it worse, she said. I won't. She believed him. She didn't entirely know why she believed him, but she did. What happened next, she would only understand fully later, pieced together from things Dong Li told her in small pieces over the weeks that followed, from things Peta's contact reported back, from the single terse statement that the Beck Group released about a board restructuring that nobody in the press quite understood. Lim Tae-jun was removed from the board. Not loudly, not publicly. Quietly, efficiently, with a finality that sent its own message to everyone watching. The two accounts that had been threatened were not just maintained, they were expanded. Her firm received a contract extension that Jae-won announced in a staff meeting with slightly too much enthusiasm, not quite meeting Zuri's eyes across the room. Her projects were returned to her the following Monday. No explanation. Just a meeting request from Jae-won and a slightly different energy in the room when she sat down. Everything has been resolved, he said. She nodded. Good. Zuri. He paused. I want to apologize for how that was handled. She looked at him. Thank you. She meant it, and she also meant everything around it, the limits of what an apology could repair, the things that had been confirmed about this city and this industry, and the specific conditions of her presence in both. I appreciate that. She went back to her desk, pulled up her work, started where she had left off. That evening, she went to him. She had not planned to. She had planned to go home, cook something simple, think about what Tae-jun's removal meant, and what Dong Li's version of not fixing it for you actually looked like in practice. She had planned to sit with it carefully, the way she sat with everything. But she found herself in a taxi, giving an address she hadn't consciously decided to give. And when the car stopped in front of a building in Yongsan she had not been to before, she sat for a moment and then got out. He opened the door before she knocked, which meant he had seen her arrive or had known she was coming, or both. She chose not to think about which. She stepped inside, looked at the apartment, high ceilings, one wall of windows, Seoul in every direction. Quiet, clean, functional in a way that felt personal rather than designed. She turned to look at him. You removed him, she said. Yes, the board position. That's not a small thing. No. He looked at her steadily. It's not. Why? He looked at her for a long moment, like he was deciding how much of the honest answer to give. Because he touched something that is mine to protect. He said it simply, without performance. And he did it to send me a message. I sent one back. She held his gaze. Something in her chest was doing the thing again, the thing she had specifically, repeatedly asked it to stop doing. You can't protect everything, she said. Quietly. I know that. My visa, my contract, my career, those aren't yours to manage. I know. Then what is this? She gestured between them, at the room, at the city outside the window, at whatever this was that they had been circling for months. What are we doing? He didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window. stood with his back slightly toward her, looking at the city. When he spoke, his voice was different, the controlled layer gone, or at least thinner. I have been careful my entire adult life about what I want and what I allow myself to want. Because wanting things in my position has consequences for other people. A pause. My father taught me that. Not directly, just by example. She waited. And then you walked back in. He turned to look at her. And I found that he stopped. Not careful anymore. The room was very quiet. She crossed it. She didn't say anything. She just stood in front of him and looked at his face, the face she had known at 16 and the face she was learning now, the difference between them and everything that had built in the space between, and then she put her hand against his jaw. He went completely still, like something that had been braced for a long time and had just stopped bracing. I'm not going anywhere, she said, but I need you to hear me. My life here is mine. My work is mine. My choices are mine. You can stand beside me. You cannot stand in front of me. He turned his face slightly into her hand. Just slightly. Like the movement wasn't fully voluntary. Understood, he said. Barely above a breath. She believed him again. She was starting to understand that believing him was going to be one of the recurring conditions of whatever this was. That it would cost her something each time. And that she would keep doing it anyway. They did not have an easy time after that. She had not expected an easy time. The tabloid attention returned, worse than before, now that Taejun's removal had given the press a thread to pull. Suddenly, Zuri McDonald was not just the foreign woman Baek Dong-lee keeps meeting. She was the woman at the center of a board restructuring. The woman whose name was appearing in financial commentary alongside a man who moved markets when he changed his lunch order. The socialite commentary was relentless in its specific, particular cruelty. It was not loud. It was never loud. That was not how that world operated. It was quiet, and it was everywhere. At events she attended for work, she would hear it in the shift of a conversation when she walked into a room. See it in the careful non-acknowledgement of certain women who would greet everyone around her and not her. Read it in the comment section she had stopped reading but couldn't fully stop reading. What exactly does she bring to this? He'll tire of the novelty. Someone should tell her what happened to the last woman who thought she understood his world. That last one she sat with for a long time. Not because it frightened her exactly. Because it confirmed something she had already suspected, that there were things about his world she did not yet know. Things he had not told her. Wounds he had mentioned in passing and not explained. She asked him about it directly one evening. No preamble. Who was she? He looked up from what he was reading. Read her expression. Put the thing he was reading down. Her name was Seo Ji-yun, he said. We were together for 2 years. 4 years ago. A pause. She was from a family that was acceptable. By the board's definition. By my mother's definition. His voice was very even. Too even. And it was still, he stopped. Chose the next word carefully. Consuming. For her. The weight of my world on a relationship. She left. Which was the right thing. For her. And for you. He looked at the window. It confirmed something I had already suspected, which was that the cost of this, he gestured, not at the apartment, at something larger, is not something I have the right to pass to someone else. She looked at him for a long moment. And yet here we are, she said. Something moved across his face. And yet here we are. She understood then, fully for the first time, the shape of what she was standing inside. Not just the external pressure, the internal one. The wound that Seo Ji-yun had confirmed and that he had been carrying ever since. The belief that loving someone for him was an act of damage. That the correct thing was restraint, distance, management. And she specifically, her face and her name and the memory of a school corridor, had walked back in and made restraint impossible. She reached over and took his hand. Not dramatically. Just held it. He looked down at their hands, then up at her. She said, I'm not Ji Yun. He said, I know. And I'm not asking you to protect me from your world. I'm asking you to let me stand in it next to you. On my own feet. A long pause. That's harder, he said. I know. She held his hand a little tighter. Do it anyway. The moment his mother found out was not dramatic. That was the thing about the Kim Soo-kyung variety of opposition. It never arrived loudly. It arrived in a phone call to her son that Zuri was not present for and only heard about afterward. It arrived in the way Dong Li was slightly more quiet for 2 days, in the way he chose his words more carefully when they were together, like someone who had had a conversation they were still processing. She waited until the second day. Then, tell me what she said. He looked at her. Dong Li. A pause. She said she hoped I understood what I was doing, and what it would look like, and what it would cost. And what did you say? I said I understood all 3 things. And he looked at her with an expression that was not quite a smile, something older and more certain than a smile. And I said none of them had changed my position. She looked at him for a long time. His mother would come around. Or she wouldn't. That was a true thing about this situation. There were variables that did not resolve cleanly, that did not respond to effort or patience or the right words. His world had been built over generations, and it would not restructure itself for her comfort, and she was not naive enough to expect it to. She would have to stand in it the way she had stood in every room that had not been built for her. Chin up, expression neutral, knowing that her presence alone was a kind of argument. What she had not expected was that she would not be standing there alone. The night everything came to a head was a Saturday in November. It was a charity event, the kind that Seoul's elite conducted annually as a form of social maintenance. Dong Li had asked her to come. Not publicly as a statement, just come. Be there. He had not framed it as a test or a declaration. She had understood it as both. She had worn the deep navy dress. She had done her makeup with precision. She had arrived composed. And it had been fine, actually. Controlled. The right people had made the right calibrated acknowledgments. His presence beside her had done what his presence always did in rooms like that. She had held herself correctly and let the evening move around her without reacting to every current beneath its surface. It was near the end of the evening when Hai-Rin appeared. Not the same Hai-Rin from the gala. That version had retreated completely after that night and not been a visible presence in any of the spaces Zuri had moved through since. This Hai-Rin was different. Something had recalibrated in her since then. She was still perfectly dressed, still moving with the ease of someone who had never needed to question her right to be in any room. But there was something else now. Something that looked, from a distance, almost like calculation. She approached when Dong Li had stepped away briefly, which was not accidental. You've lasted longer than I expected, she said. Her voice was pleasant, almost conversational. I mean that as a genuine observation. Zuri looked at her, did not respond. He's not easy to hold. Hai-Rin tilted her head slightly. Most people find that out faster than you seem to have. Or maybe you already know, and you're very determined. Is there a point to this? Hai-Rin smiled. I just want you to understand something, woman to woman. This city, she gestured gracefully at the room, does not forget. And it does not forgive inconsistency. You are not the first person he is focused on. You will not be the last. And when it's over, everything you've built here will carry the residue of it. Your work, your reputation, all of it. She paused. I'm not saying this to be cruel. You are absolutely saying this to be cruel. Zuri's voice was very calm. But finish. Something shifted in Hai-Rin's expression. Not anger. Reassessment. Just a pause. Be realistic about what you are to him. And what you can actually be in this world. I know exactly what I am. Zuri held her gaze. The question is whether you do. A silence. Hai-Rin looked at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, she moved away into the room. Dong Li returned 2 minutes later. He looked at her face. Read something in it immediately. What happened? Nothing important. She picked up her glass. Shall we go? He did not push, but he stayed close for the rest of the evening, not possessively, not performing anything, just close, like someone who had understood that something had been said and was answering it with his position. In the car afterward, she looked out the window at the city moving past. She's not entirely wrong, she said, without turning from the window. Your world does not forget, and it does not forgive inconsistency. He was quiet, but she's wrong about the rest of it. She turned to look at him. I know what I am to you, and I know what I am to myself. Those two things are not in competition. He reached over, took her hand. No, he said, they're not. She turned back to the window. The city moved, indifferent and enormous and lit up in every direction. And she felt not safe exactly. Nothing about this was safe, but something adjacent to it. Something that was choosing to stay despite the knowing. Something that was hers. Her contract renewed. 6 months, then 12. She did not know what had been said or arranged or simply left to resolve naturally. She did not ask. Some things were easier carried without the full weight of knowing. Her mother called from Nairobi on a Sunday in December. The usual call, warm and familiar, and laced with a current of gentle pressure that had been running through their conversation since Zuri was 19 and first left home. Are you eating? I'm eating, Mama. Are you sleeping? I'm sleeping. Are you happy? A pause. Different from the others. And I mean actually. Not the answer you give me. Zuri sat for a moment on her couch, looking at the Seoul winter outside the window. I think so. She said it carefully. Because it was careful. Because happy was not quite the word, and she did not want to give her mother a word that wasn't true. Something good is happening. It's complicated, but it's good. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, complicated good is still good. Yes, Zuri said. That's what I've decided. Good. A pause. Now tell me about him. Zuri laughed. And it was real, sudden and surprised and warmer than anything she'd felt in a long time. How did you? Zuri, I'm your mother. A gentle firmness. Tell me. So she told her. Not everything. The version that was real without being complete. The school, the years between, the ballroom, the small restaurant in Songdong-gu, the mismatched chairs, the cost of it, the choice of it. Her mother listened, did not interrupt. When Zuri finished, there was a long pause. This man, her mother said, he sees you. Not a question. Yes, quietly. He sees me. Then the rest, a pause. It's just weather. Weather passes. Zuri sat with that for a long time after the call ended. The city outside her window. The winter light. The noise of Seoul filtering through the glass like it always did, present and indifferent and enormous. Weather passes. She picked up her phone, opened his contact. Are you free tonight? His reply came in 40 seconds. Yes. She got up, started getting ready. The navy dress was at the cleaners, so she chose the deep burgundy one, the first one, the one from the gala, the one she had worn the night she had stood in a room that wasn't built for her and refused to look at the floor. She put it on, looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. Then she picked up her bag and went out into the city. Thank you for staying until the very end. I need to ask you something before you go. When Zuri pulled away, when she made that phone call and said this isn't possible, do you think she was right to? Or do you think she should have stayed and fought for it earlier, even at the cost of everything she'd built? In that moment in the car, when she told Dong Li she knew exactly what she was to him, was that strength? Or was it something harder than strength? Something that cost more than it looked like from the outside? Type your answer below. I want to know which side of that conversation you were on. Seoul and the Sahara, where the love is real, the city is unforgiving, and the stories stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Thank you for being here tonight.